It began with a whisper across the static, barely audible through the crackle of a dying signal. Final call, if you're out there, sanctuary is real. Repeat, sanctuary is real. At 5:32 a.m., in the remnants of what was once Denver, Colorado, 50 souls huddled inside an abandoned subway station, their eyes locked on an ancient transistor radio. Dust floated in the pale shafts of morning light filtering through shattered grates above. The voice was a miracle, hope wrapped in static, a lifeline tossed into the abyss. For 3 months, they hadn't heard anything but screams, moans, and the gnashing of teeth. And now, this. Gideon Cross, a former paramedic turned reluctant leader, stood tall amid the others, his jaw tight with a mix of hope and dread. He had buried more people than he'd saved. He had seen cities crumble and watched as friends turned into monsters before his eyes. But he'd also kept these 50 alive, barely. And now they had a chance. Beside him, Dr. Elaine Ward adjusted the dials, her hands trembling. Once a top-tier CDC virologist, now she was just another survivor, her white coat stained and torn, her knowledge their only defense against the infected. Signal's weak, she muttered. But it's real. It came from the northeast. Somewhere near the old missile silos outside Cheyenne. A low murmur of disbelief rolled through the group. Sanctuary, someone whispered. Or a trap, said another. But Gideon raised a hand. It doesn't matter. We're running out of supplies, the station won't hold much longer, and we all know what's coming. We move tonight. The air turned still, heavy with the weight of impossible decisions. Outside, the dead shuffled restlessly in the streets, drawn by the scent of human breath. Inside, 50 hearts beat faster with the return of something long lost, purpose. Among the group were all walks of life, thrown together by chance and chaos. There was Elijah, a blind old man who could still shoot straighter than most. Tara and Finn, teenage twins who hadn't spoken since their parents were devoured in front of them. Miko, a Japanese engineer who said little but built weapons out of scrap. And Rosa, a former kindergarten teacher with a heart of steel and a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. Each of them had survived horrors unspoken. Each had scars, some visible, others buried deep. But they all shared one thing now, a countdown. Not just of days or hours, but of souls. The last broadcast hinted at it. Only 50 spots left. 50 people allowed in. No more. And they had just that number. It's like they were waiting for us, Rosa said quietly. Or waiting to see if we'd last this long, Gideon replied. The plan was formed quickly. They would move under cover of darkness, using the tunnels to reach the northern highway, avoiding the overrun zones as best they could. A journey of over 100 miles, through cities long since fallen, forests now crawling with ferals, and across rivers tainted with rot. Elaine pulled Gideon aside. This sanctuary, if it exists, they've got containment protocols. Quarantine gates. Maybe even immunity trials. They won't just let anyone walk in. I know, he said. That's why we stay together. All 50. Or none. But as night approached and the last rays of sun vanished beyond the skyline, there were whispers. Doubts. Secrets. In the far corner of the station, Jonah, a twitchy man with a crooked smile, clutched something in his coat. A map. A key. And a look in his eyes that said he knew more than he let on. The group assembled at the tunnel entrance, flashlights covered in red film, bags packed, weapons ready. Gideon looked over them one last time, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down like a tombstone. We move silent. We move fast. And we don't leave anyone behind. The gate creaked open. The first step was taken. But above ground, something stirred. A signal had been sent. Not just to survivors. Something else had heard the broadcast. And it was hungry. The tunnels breathed decay. Thick with mildew and death, they coiled beneath the city like the intestines of a rotting beast. As the 50 survivors marched deeper, flashlights flickered and boots squelched against ancient, waterlogged rails. Rats scattered ahead of them, sometimes. Other times, they ran from something. Gideon led the line, rifle raised, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. Behind him, Miko checked a hand-drawn map marked with collapsed routes and safe exits. The tunnels weren't just a path, they were a graveyard. At least 24 other groups had tried to flee through here in the early days of the outbreak. None made it out. The group moved in tight silence. Tara and Finn stuck to the middle, close to Rosa, whose spiked bat was dark with dried blood. Elijah, walking near the rear, kept his shotgun ready, listening more than looking. He said he could hear the dead coming before anyone else could. An hour in, the group encountered their first obstacle, a collapsed support beam. Dust still lingered in the air as if it had just fallen. Several murmured prayers, but Gideon only clenched his fists. "We'll climb over. One at a time. Quietly." Elaine helped the children across first. Then came the adults, one by one, scraping boots and whispering reassurances. But when Jonah reached the beam, he hesitated. His eyes darted to the side, a shadowed maintenance tunnel. "What is it?" Rosa hissed. Jonah shook his head. "Nothing. Just thought I saw, never mind." But Gideon didn't miss the way Jonah's hands slid back inside his coat, where he'd hidden the map. Something was off about him. Halfway through the tunnels, the walls began to tremble with a low, rhythmic thump. Not footsteps. Not a cave-in. Something deeper. Elaine froze mid-step. "Do you hear that?" "It's coming from above," Miko said. "Something heavy. Something organized." Suddenly, the group's radios crackled. Not with static, but with whispers. Dozens of voices, layered atop one another, all speaking the same word. "Run." Then the tunnel lit up behind them. Not with fire or light, but with eyes. Glowing, dead, soulless eyes. They weren't alone. "Move!" Gideon shouted. The survivors surged forward as shapes emerged from the darkness, ferals. Not slow, shambling husks. These were fast. Rabid. Adapted to the dark. Their flesh was gray and glistening, patches torn away, teeth filed down from chewing bone. The group sprinted, weapons flailing. Tara screamed as a feral lunged at her, but Rosa swung her bat and sent it crashing into a wall with a wet thunk. Elijah fired blindly, the blast echoing like thunder. One by one, the creatures dropped, but more came, screeching through the tunnels like banshees. Up ahead, a rusted ladder led to a maintenance hatch. Miko climbed first, wrenching it open and dropping a flare outside to reveal an alley above. "Go! Up!" he shouted. One by one, they climbed. Finn nearly slipped, but Elaine caught him. Jonah was last, by design. He paused at the base, and instead of climbing, he pulled out a flare gun. He fired into the opposite tunnel. Fwoosh! The creatures roared as the fire lit the walls, forcing them back temporarily. But Jonah didn't move. Not yet. He pulled the map from his coat and looked at it again. "There's a faster way, if I go alone." Gideon yelled from above, "Jonah, move." With a last glance back into the firelit tunnel, Jonah stuffed the map away and climbed the ladder. They emerged into moonlight, gasping for breath, bloodied but alive, for now. But behind them, the echo of screams and screeches grew fainter. Until the tunnel went silent once more. Only 97 miles to go. But someone, or something, was already tracking them. To be continued in Part 3, The Road to Nowhere. They hit the surface just before dawn, emerging into the skeletal remains of a once bustling industrial district. Concrete husks of buildings loomed over them like silent watchers. Smoke curled from somewhere in the distance, mixing with the morning mist. A bad sign. The group regrouped in a loading dock, barricading themselves inside a half-collapsed warehouse. Everyone was breathing hard. Some coughed. Some bled. But they were alive, though Gideon knew it wouldn't last if they didn't keep moving. Elaine unzipped her medical kit. 3 with bites, 2 with sprains, one dislocated shoulder, she reported, her voice grim. And we lost our radio to the ferals. We'll fix that later, Gideon replied. Right now, we rest. 10 minutes. Rosa leaned against a broken vending machine, eyes on the door. What happens when we run into another group? There's 50 of us. If this sanctuary really only takes 50, what if someone tries to take a spot? They'll have to go through me, Gideon said without hesitation. Rosa gave a thin smile. Was hoping you'd say that. Meanwhile, Jonah sat apart from the others, cradling his coat. Inside, the map whispered promises. He'd studied it again last night, under the stars. There was a shortcut. A long-forgotten tunnel under the old highway, bypassing 2 major horde zones. But it was narrow. Maybe enough for 1, maybe 2. He didn't tell the others. The journey resumed shortly after sunrise. They moved northward along cracked streets, stepping over rusted-out cars and bones bleached by time. Signs of desperation were everywhere, spray-painted messages like "God left us and only the strong survived." A school bus had been turned into a barricade. It didn't work. The inside was a slaughterhouse. Miko kept watch on rooftops, using a scoped rifle salvaged from a pawnshop. Movement ahead, he warned mid-afternoon. 3 figures. Everyone froze. The shapes approached, slowly, carefully. Human. Survivors. Hands up. Gideon barked. The strangers complied. 2 women and a child. Thin. Pale. Hollow-eyed. We heard the same broadcast, said the older woman, her voice cracking. We've been running ever since. Please, let us come with you. Whispers broke out behind Gideon. They're not infected. They'll slow us down. There's no room. Elaine stepped forward. We have to help them. But Gideon's eyes were hard. We're already at capacity. The child coughed, deep, guttural. Elaine's hand went to her med kit. She's sick. Then Rosa noticed the telltale bruise under the child's chin. A bite. Days old. She's turning, Rosa said, backing up. Suddenly, the younger woman lunged, desperate, deranged. You're not leaving us behind again. Gideon tackled her to the ground just as Miko raised his rifle and shot the older woman in the leg. The child screamed once. Then collapsed. Convulsing. The others watched in frozen horror as the change began, flesh bubbling, veins blackening, teeth sharpening into a predator's snarl. Gideon didn't hesitate. He ended it. Silence fell. Elijah whispered, God forgive us. The group marched on, shaken and more fractured than before. Every step forward felt heavier now. That night, as they camped beneath the remnants of a billboard that read "Welcome to Wyoming," Elaine cornered Jonah. I saw your map. You've been hiding something. Jonah didn't deny it. There's a path that could save us 2 days. Then why haven't you told Gideon? He leaned in, voice low. Because we won't all fit. And once they find that out, it won't be a vote, it'll be a war. Elaine looked at him, horror growing. You're planning to leave us behind. Jonah stared at the stars, and for the first time in days, he smiled. No, he said. I'm planning to survive. The next morning came with a blood-red sky and a wind that stank of rot. The group moved quickly, following an old freight trail that curved toward the foothills outside the city ruins. Birds no longer sang. Even the insects had grown quiet. The world was holding its breath. Jonah walked near the back, keeping his map tucked beneath his jacket. Elaine's eyes never left him. She hadn't told Gideon about the shortcut yet. Not because she trusted Jonah, but because she wasn't sure who to trust anymore. They passed through what had once been a rest stop. Vines crawled up vending machines and corpses lay slumped in picnic tables like forgotten mannequins. Gideon signaled a halt and sent Miko and Rosa to scout ahead. While the group rested, Jonah made his move. He approached Gideon, casual. There's a better way. Faster. Safer. I didn't want to say anything earlier, not with tensions high, but if we cut through an old maintenance tunnel beneath the interstate, we can bypass the horde that's circling the canyon pass. Gideon eyed him. And you're just now telling me this? I had to be sure. The tunnel's narrow. No room for 50. But if we split into 2 groups, it could work. No, Gideon said, voice cold. We stay together. You don't understand, Jonah pressed. The longer route takes us right through 2 horde territories. We might not all make it. Gideon stepped closer, jaw clenched. Better that we die together, than let the strong abandon the weak. Before Jonah could respond, Miko's voice crackled over the walkie. We've got a problem. Big one. You need to see this. They moved quickly, creeping toward the edge of a canyon pass. Below, stretching across the valley, was a river of undead. Thousands. Silent. Patient. Like they were waiting. No going through that, Rosa whispered. Not unless we have a death wish. Gideon studied the scene grimly. We circle around. It'll add 3 days. Jonah stepped forward. Or we take the tunnel. Silence. All eyes turned to him. There's no room for all of us, Rosa said slowly. You said it yourself. We could rotate through in waves, Jonah said. Smaller groups. Fast. Clean. No way to know how long that tunnel is, Miko muttered. Or what's in it. Gideon stared at the map, then at his people, hungry, tired, terrified. Fine, he said at last. We try the tunnel. But we go together. No splitting up. That night, they found the hidden entrance under the husk of a burnt-down diner. It was choked with vines and rusted shut. Miko used a crowbar, and the iron door groaned open like a warning. A wave of cold air hit them, wet and foul. The tunnel yawned ahead like the throat of a giant beast. This feels wrong, Elaine whispered. Inside, the group moved in single file. The walls closed in. Water dripped from pipes above. Their footsteps echoed forever. Rats scurried beneath their boots. An hour in, the tunnel split. 2 paths. Jonah turned to Gideon. This isn't on the map. Miko scowled. You said you knew the way. I do, Jonah insisted. We go right. But Tara, who'd been silent for days, stepped forward. Left has air currents. Right smells like rot. Gideon thought for a moment. We split. 10 to the right, the rest with me to the left. We'll circle back and meet at the next checkpoint. Jonah didn't protest. In fact, he smiled. That should have been the warning. Elaine, still suspicious, followed Jonah's group. She stayed close, hand on her pistol. The further they walked, the more the air thickened. The smell of death clung to the walls. Then they saw it. A pile of bones. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Stripped clean. What the hell, someone started. And then the walls moved. From the darkness came a sound like knives dragging across glass. Then came the swarm. Not the slow, shuffling undead, but something else. Faster. Wilder. Smaller. Children. Infected children. Dozens of them. They leapt from the shadows, eyes glowing, jaws unhinged. They tore through the first 2 survivors in seconds. Screams echoed down the tunnel. Elaine fired, but they kept coming. Jonah turned and ran. Coward. Elaine tried to rally the rest, but the narrow tunnel made it impossible to fight. Only 4 of them made it out of that section alive, bloody, wide-eyed, and broken. When they stumbled back to the checkpoint, only Gideon and his group were waiting. Where's Jonah? He asked. Elaine's voice was flat. Gone. Gideon looked at the survivors, now down to 42. He didn't say it, but the countdown had begun. They didn't talk much after the tunnel. No one wanted to relive the screams. No one wanted to admit the truth, that they were losing people faster than time could carry them forward. 42 left. Gideon led them up the mountain path in silence, his boots crunching ash with every step. The forest they'd entered was blackened, charred by old wildfires. The sky above was a grim smear of gray. Trees stood like skeletal fingers, and the air reeked of smoke and death. "We're not alone," Miko said, eyes darting. "I don't see anything," Rosa replied. "You won't," he muttered. "But I feel them." Gideon kept moving. He knew what Miko meant. He felt it too, the prickling sensation crawling down his neck. Like they were being watched by something older than the virus. Something patient. Midway through the forest, they found a church. It stood almost perfectly preserved, untouched by flames. White stone, a steeple that pierced the sky, and a door left wide open. Too inviting. "Could be shelter," Elaine said. "Could be a trap," Rosa countered. Gideon made the call. "We sweep it. Fast. Then decide." Inside, the pews were covered in dust. Bible pages fluttered gently in the breeze that came from a shattered stained-glass window. The altar had been stripped clean. A single candle still burned. That's when the whispering began. Soft. Distant. "Do you hear that?" Tara whispered. Everyone nodded. The whispers grew louder, bouncing off the stone walls, speaking in a language none of them knew. A low chant, steady, hypnotic. Then someone screamed. They found Elijah on the ground, eyes wide, mouth foaming. Claw marks across his chest. No attacker. No sound. Just blood, and silence. "It's the place," Rosa breathed. "It's cursed." "Buildings don't kill people," Gideon snapped. But even he didn't believe it. They buried Elijah behind the chapel and moved on. Further down the mountain trail, they came across another group of survivors, only 6 of them, pale and shaking, dressed in military uniforms that hadn't seen supply drops in weeks. Their leader, a woman named Captain Reyes, explained that they'd been stationed at a FEMA safe zone that fell 2 days earlier. Overrun from the inside. "They weren't bit," she said, dead-eyed. "They just turned. All at once. Like someone flipped a switch." "How did you survive?" Elaine asked. Reyes didn't answer. Gideon debated letting them join. Then he saw one of the soldiers hiding something under his coat, rations. Military grade. Enough to feed 20 people. "We could use that," Rosa whispered. "We're not stealing from them," Elaine argued. "We won't have to," Gideon said. That night, they made camp near a ravine. Gideon stayed up with Miko, watching Rhea's group. Midnight passed. Then came the noise. Footsteps. But not from the woods. From beneath. A rumbling groan split the earth, and then dozens of skeletal hands burst from the dirt. Not zombies, something worse. Something older. Ash-covered figures, mouths full of soot, eyes empty. "They're not infected," Miko shouted. "They're burned. They died in the fire." Rosa screamed as one of them dragged a soldier into the ground, vanishing in a puff of dust. The camp erupted into chaos. Gunfire. Screams. Running feet. Gideon grabbed Reyes and hauled her up. "What is this place?" She finally spoke. "We called it Dead Hollow. We thought the fire cleansed it. We were wrong." One by one, the Ashborn dragged down anything that couldn't move. Reyes' people fought hard, but by sunrise, only Reyes remained. And 2 more of Gideon's people were gone. 40 had become 38. As they fled the forest, the whispers followed. Not in words, but in memories. The smell of burnt skin. The sound of forgotten names. The feeling of hopelessness when you realize the world you're fighting to survive no longer wants you to win. Later that day, they reached a plateau with a rusted overlook station. The radio sparked to life again, crackling static, then a voice. "Final checkpoint. Eastern Ridge. 48 hours." Only 50 may enter. Coordinates confirmed. Do not delay. Gideon lowered the radio. We're close. Closer than we've ever been, Elaine said softly. But the others had heard it too. Only 50. And with 38 left, the countdown had just become personal. They moved faster now. The transmission had lit a fire under their feet. 48 hours, one final checkpoint, and a hard limit, only 50 survivors allowed inside. No exceptions. No mercy. But a new problem was growing inside the group. They were 38. And as word spread, something shifted. Every glance carried suspicion. Every whispered conversation made others paranoid. It wasn't about survival anymore, it was about being among the final 50. Even though they still had room, people had already started counting. The ridge came into view by late afternoon, stretching like a spine across the horizon. The path narrowed, winding up the cliffs. One wrong step meant death, but they didn't slow. Near the summit, they found a crashed transport truck half buried in rubble. Bullet holes peppered the frame. The back doors hung open, revealing what was inside: military crates. Supplies. Food. Weapons. And a blood-smeared data slate blinking faintly. Miko powered it on. A recorded message played, broken and glitching. Repeat, emergency lockdown in effect. Evacuation window limited. Trust protocols suspended. Any survivor group exceeding quota will be denied entry. No exceptions. Maintain order by any means necessary. Elaine looked around the group. Some had gone pale. No one's saying it, Rosa muttered, but they're thinking it. Gideon stared into the distance. Let's just keep moving. But that night, everything unraveled. They made camp in a cave overlooking the valley. Fires burned low. Reyes took first watch. Gideon barely slept, he felt it coming. He just didn't know when. The scream shattered the silence. By the time they reached the far side of the cave, 2 people were already dead, stabbed. One of the medics was missing. So were half the rations. Someone's running, Miko growled. Rosa pointed to fresh tracks outside the cave. 2 people. Maybe 3. Gideon, Miko, and Reyes took off in pursuit, running down the ridge trail. The others stayed behind, shaken. Elaine stood over the bodies, quiet. She saw what others hadn't. The stabs were quick. Clean. Professional. Someone knew what they were doing. The chase ended near a dead pine tree where the traders had paused to rest. 2 of them, Liam and Becca. Good people. Or so they thought. They didn't fight back. Becca dropped to her knees. You don't understand. People are whispering. They're planning already. To turn on each other once the number drops below 50. We're not there yet, Gideon snapped. There's still room for everyone. But not for weakness, Liam said. And some of us, we won't make it unless we start choosing. You murdered our people, Reyes said coldly, raising her rifle. They were already slowing us down. The wind howled across the cliffside. Gideon turned his back. Reyes didn't hesitate. 2 shots. 2 bodies. When they returned to camp, no one said a word. They saw the blood on Reyes' hands. They saw the cold in her eyes. The next day was quiet. Tense. Even the wind seemed to watch them. At noon, a storm rolled in, lightning crackling across the mountains like veins in the sky. They were forced to shelter in a ranger station carved into the rocks. Inside, they found evidence of another group, old photos, burned logs, scribbled messages on the walls. They said only 50. We were 64. We fought. They opened fire. It's not the zombies you need to fear, it's the people with hope in their eyes. She betrayed us all for a seat inside. Elaine traced the words with trembling fingers. This is what we're walking into, she whispered. Gideon stepped outside, rain pouring over him, and stared at the horizon where the final checkpoint would be. A secure compound, somewhere beyond the next ridge. But the messages haunted him. Was he leading these people to safety? Or a massacre? That night, he gathered everyone. Wet. Cold. Shivering. "We're 36 now," he said plainly. "If we stay strong, we all make it in." No one said a word. But in the shadows, deals were already being made. Knives were being sharpened. Friends were turning into liabilities. Alliances into whispers. 36 people. 50 slots. The problem wasn't the zombies anymore. It was us. The storm passed by morning, but it left behind a silence that felt wrong. No birds. No wind. Just the low rumble of distant thunder, fading behind the mountains they'd already crossed. Gideon stood at the edge of the trail, looking out across the valley that led to their final destination. He could see it now, the faint outline of the checkpoint compound built into the cliffs on the far side. Walls. Towers. Floodlights. Safety. It looked close. But between them and the checkpoint was something far worse. The valley below was crawling with them. Zombies. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. A sea of decayed bodies, slowly weaving through the trees like a swarm of insects. The largest horde they had ever seen. The kind that didn't hunt, they devoured. "No way around," Miko said grimly. "No cover either. Open terrain all the way." Gideon counted their group, 36. He couldn't lose another one. "We wait," Reyes suggested. "Move at night." "Quieter." "Too risky," Elaine argued. "We'll lose our footing." "We could run right into them." "They'll hear us coming anyway," Rosa muttered. No one had an answer. As the group set up temporary shelter at the ridge's edge, Tara, a sharp-eyed teenager barely 17, spotted movement. Not from the horde. From the cliffs to the north. "Someone else is watching us," she whispered. Binoculars confirmed it. A small group, maybe 10 people, was perched high above, armed, well-equipped, and observing. "Think they're survivors?" Rosa asked. "They're not moving toward the compound," Reyes replied. "They're waiting. Watching." "For what?" "For us to thin the numbers," Gideon said flatly. He realized then, not everyone was just racing the zombies. Some were racing each other. That night, they made a move. Miko, Gideon, Reyes, and 3 others went forward to plant noise traps, old radios, broken alarms, anything they could find. They aimed to draw the horde away from the main path and carve a corridor through the valley. It worked. For about 10 minutes. Then a stray scream, someone back at camp. A flare lit the sky. The horde turned. It came like a wave. Gideon and the others ran full speed back to the ridge, but the monsters were faster now, desperate, hungry, and loud. The first to fall was Nolan. Bitten mid-stride, dragged into the dirt. The second was Tara. She screamed for someone to pull her up from a collapsed slope, but no one could reach her in time. Then came the cliff sprint. Up the rocks, over the ledges, slipping on wet stone and blood. One wrong move meant death. And still, they ran. At the top, Reyes turned and opened fire. Her rifle screamed until the barrel glowed red. Miko grabbed the last flare and tossed it into the far woods. A thunderous boom, and the horde turned again. But the damage was done. When they counted again, they were 28. They had lost 8 in 10 minutes. And now they had to cross the valley, fast. With the horde moving west, the group darted between ruined vehicles, burned trees, and abandoned equipment. Zombies still lingered, lone stragglers stumbling out of shadows, jaws snapping, eyes empty. Every second felt like a gamble. By sunrise, the gates of the checkpoint compound were in sight. Closer. Real. The walls towered over them, reinforced steel and concrete. A drone buzzed overhead. A voice boomed through the hidden speaker system. "Stop. Identify your group." Gideon stepped forward. Survivors from Sector 19. We have 28 remaining. A long pause. Then static crackled back. Access granted. 28 slots remain. Proceed. No fighting. No delays. Cheers erupted. Elaine fell to her knees, crying. Rosa hugged Reyes, who just kept her eyes on the gates. Miko stared back at the valley. But the celebration was cut short. Behind them, gunfire. The cliffside group had made their move. They weren't here for hope. They were here for a spot inside, and they had 10 people. With 28 already counted, there was only room for 50. Which meant 8 had to die. The gates of the checkpoint creaked open. Gideon clenched his jaw. We made it. Reyes loaded a fresh magazine. But it looks like we're going to have to fight to keep it. The checkpoint gates stood wide open. Beyond them, salvation, steel walls, guarded towers, food, medicine, safety. It was everything they had been chasing since day one. And they were so close. But survival had one last test. The sound of gunfire rolled across the valley like thunder. From the cliffs, the rival group descended, 10 survivors, weapons drawn, faces masked by dirt and desperation. They weren't running from the undead. They were hunting them. Gideon stood his ground. We already cleared the number, he shouted toward the cliffs. 28. There's no room for more. But they kept coming. They don't care, Reyes growled, rifle steady. They've come to make room. Miko loaded a fresh clip. Then we hold the line. Rosa turned to the others. Anyone who doesn't want to fight, get inside. Now. The checkpoint soldiers didn't intervene. Their orders were clear, open the gates for the first 50. What happened outside the gate wasn't their concern. As the rival group closed in, tension hit a snapping point. The first shot rang out, no one knew who fired it, but suddenly bullets were flying. Gideon dove behind a broken ATV. Miko dropped one attacker with a clean shot to the leg, then ducked just as a grenade tore apart a tree beside him. Reyes moved like she was born in battle, picking targets with brutal efficiency. Elaine stayed close to the children and elders, guiding them one by one through the open gate. Every person who entered took them closer to that critical number, 50. 28 survivors were already inside the count. 10 attackers were trying to take their place. And bullets didn't lie. Gideon got clipped in the arm, nothing fatal, but it sent him sprawling. The world spun. Through the haze of smoke and screams, he saw Rosa cornered by 2 attackers. Just before they fired, Reyes appeared like a ghost, swift, deadly, and took both down. But not without a cost. A spray of rounds tore through Reyes's side. She collapsed with a grunt, blood soaking her jacket. Gideon crawled to her. Stay with me. She coughed, smirking through the pain. Tell the gate, 27 now. He shook his head. Don't say that. But she shoved something into his hand, her access wristband. You lead them. You finish this. By the time the last bullet was fired, 3 more attackers were dead. 2 fled. 1 surrendered. Silence returned to the valley. Elaine called out from the gate, we've only got 3 more spots. Who's left? Gideon looked around. Miko was limping. Rosa was dragging a wounded child. The surrendered attacker was on her knees, sobbing. And Reyes wasn't moving. Gideon made the call. He, Miko, Rosa, and the child moved forward. The soldier at the gate held up a hand. Count? 50, Gideon said quietly. That's all of us. The woman paused. You're carrying 1 extra. He looked down at the attacker, the one who had surrendered. She stared at him, tears in her eyes. Please. I didn't shoot anyone. I didn't mean. Gideon reached into his pocket and held out Reyes's band. She's not coming in. There was a long silence. Then the gates closed behind them. 50 inside. None more. The compound was quiet. Sterile. Clean. Too clean. Like the world outside had never existed. Gideon looked around, numb. He had led them here. But at what cost? Later, as he sat alone at the edge of the compound wall, he took out a notebook Reyes used to carry. Inside were her scribbled maps, names of the fallen, reminders of why they kept going. At the very back was a note. If we ever make it, tell them the cost. Not just in lives, but in humanity. He closed the book. The nightmare was over. But survival? That was just beginning. The end.